Hi there, my name is Kate and welcome to my channel, Trinergy Awakens Naturally. I wanted, excuse me, to begin a discussion that's going to be quite a few videos in a series talking about mental health. A lot of people don't realize that we all have mental health. When people say, oh, that person's got mental health. Well, we all have mental health. It's a matter that when we're stressed, when we're super duper, over the edge of what we can adequately and in a healthy way function and cope with our stress, then we start having diagnoses sometimes related to our mental health. But we all have mental health. It's a matter of what's the status of that mental health. And people that have mental illness, it's not that mental illness is a quote, it's that they're used interchangeably, that someone with mental health has got mental illness issues, and we all have mental health. So that's been beaten enough. We can probably move on to understand that when we have challenges with our mental health, doesn't mean automatically that we are diagnosed with a mental illness. Many people are. PTSD is common, depression is common, anxiety is common. It's probably more common than people are actually being diagnosed. However, you can run into far more detailed diagnoses that involve a whole list of symptoms that the average person may or may not really experience. And when you put it all together and it makes that particular diagnosis, there's even less folks. However, we're all challenging with how we're handling our stress, especially now as things in the beginning of 2023, we've really stepped up the violence on the planet. We've stepped up the stress. We've got everywhere we look, we see people being challenged and how they're going to cope with what's happening with an increase in everything everywhere where it would be better if it wasn't increased, and a decrease in things that it really would be better to have that, not be decreased. So we're all challenged. Now, what can we do with that? Whether we have an actual diagnosis or not, we all have ways that we can cope with keeping our mental health in a much healthier spot. If we get challenged, or when we get challenged, if we're prone to feel a little bit down, a little bit depressed, if we're prone to anxiety attacks, if we're prone to rage attacks, if we're prone to anything that takes us out of that balance, a pretty balanced and equilibrium of, fairly chill. Doesn't mean we can't be, excited people. It means that if we're prone to get out of balance and have erratic, moments even, we really could take a moment probably to look at our mental health and see what can happen, that I might be effectively changing what's happening to me going forward. So what I most want to talk about is anxiety attacks, for this part of the series anyway. Anxiety attacks, or anything that takes us to that, spot of noticeable imbalance, where we go off the rails, with anger, or we go off the rails with anxiety, or we just shut down, and do nothing, just shut down completely. So this is probably pertaining more to anxiety or rage, one of the more, explosive expressions of imbalance, but pick where you are in that and let's go forward with it. So first of all, when we're having some sort of stress that's taking us out of emotional balance, we need to really recognize right off the top, what's the things that are going on that other people are saying, that I'm saying, that I'm feeling, whatever. What are the key words that I need to know about? This is really a mental health emergency that needs more than I can give it, as in it's a danger to self or others. The statements coming out are dangerous, that are threatening self or others, and looking for sometimes those subtle cues of what does that mean. It doesn't always have to be, very rageful experiences or very dramatic experiences that someone can be speaking or having, a very depressed moment or a very dangerous moment in their own mind. So sometimes we have to look for the subtle cues. However, recognize them, especially if we know someone intimately, then we can see shifts in their behavior. Are they making eye contact? How are they speaking? Is it different than what they normally do? And really, those are things that are a little bit harder with the average person that you don't know out in public. Rank stranger, you might not know that. However, if you're ever unsure, it's probably better, not always, but probably better to get intervention and call 911 and ask if you're not sure. If you've got someone that's obviously off the deep end and they cannot control their panic, their rage, their anxiety, or they don't appear to be beaming in from a place that's really real. Those are people that are very much in danger because they're not really tuned into reality as you and I might see that. And that makes them victims perhaps, or it makes them perpetrators perhaps. So we need to be very careful about how we're doing interactions with those people. And it's best to get people that are trained in mental health to take care of that. And oftentimes EMSs and police involvement can get a little bit dicey with people being nervous, However, some of those places are becoming more and more trained in how to deal with mental health emergencies, because the last thing that we want to do is, if someone's already feeling imbalanced, is add more stress to that. However, if they're a danger to self or others, please take that as, I need to know immediately what to recognize as the need to call for help, backup. I'm not going to be able to disarm somebody perhaps, or, talk them down if they're, in certain spots. That's not really my expertise. So I need to get the expertise that really can help that the best. And oftentimes, if we can point someone in the direction of just being able to call, a hotline of some kind, or we can offer them a few minutes of safe interaction where, you look like you're super stressed, can you come this way and let's talk about that. Know what your capabilities are. And if you're just not sure, please call someone on behalf of that person who isn't able to call, or isn't, for whatever, willing to call. It probably won't end well either way, whether we're taking the initiative or another person is refusing to take the initiative. Really doesn't matter. If it's already highly explosive or highly volatile, it probably won't end well. So it's just a kindness to, when it's out of our ballpark, just go forward and let's move this along with more expertise than is already standing right here. So when we take this into a more intimate understanding, what I really want to impress is that we have to know ourselves well enough to know what are our own personal triggers. You can put all of this, decide where you are, in the storyline as it's possibly being created in your mind or in your own life. Pardon me. We have to know our own triggers. And if we know someone else, if we live with someone, whatever, but from here on out, let's talk about it in terms of ourselves. If I know my own triggers, if I know what really sets me off and just, whatever, then I know how to avoid places that might be, for instance, me personally, I'm very set off sometimes with autism and a seizure disorder. I can be very, set off with noises, bright lights, things that are, jarring. I don't do large crowds, because of anxiety as well. Because I don't handle that well, I end up having anxiety attacks that are unnecessary if I just avoid the mall or large gatherings or things like that. And excuse me, I feel no ways about it in terms of telling people, no, I'm not really going to be able to do that comfortably to join you in that experience. That's part of who and what I am. And it's a falsehood for me to try to tell myself that I'm just not, healed enough or healthy enough or an emotionally balanced person enough to say that I refuse to attend a large gathering because it might set off, unnecessary anxiety and all of that. If I were at home and agoraphobic and never going out, that might be true. However, that's me knowing my triggers to just turn down invitation for anything that might put me in that direction. And I can stretch my boundaries of what that is. If I want to test it out every once in a while, I do. And I find out, just where that line is. And it's pretty consistently the same, that no, if it's a large group and there's going to be, a large crowd and lots of noise and things like that, you probably won't ever find me in a heavy metal concert. It won't happen, more than likely. You also wouldn't find me at the London Symphony either, more than likely, because large crowds, that's just me personally. So understanding that other people's prejudices about what our triggers might be, irrelevant. And understanding if we're looking at, people around us who we might be sensitive to their triggers, understanding that we don't always have to understand somebody else's trigger. That's not what we need to understand. We need to understand that they have them. And if they're really showing and saying to us, quite honestly, that's just really best for me not to do that. It's really good to respect that. It's very good to respect that and not ask people to push beyond what their actual capability is. And you can get into a whole lot of conversation about, well, they could if they weren't so. Yes, that's possibly true. And you have to work through a different part of, healing emotionally and communication and codependency and things like that than what I'm actually talking about. I'm talking about averting, unnecessary anxiety provoking situations and straight up panic attacks and things like that. So having respect for people's boundaries, they're self-stated, and the ones that appear to be coming up if we're watching them, and definitely for ourselves. Don't hang out at the fair, the state fair, if that's a place that's just really gonna, set me off, even though somebody might be coaxing us, oh, you can do it, come on, come on, come on, come on. I've gone down those rabbit holes a few times and it didn't go well. So, and anxiety has a very ugly habit of spinning around, and just flat spinning into a death spiral of, really that's not going to go well until there's an event somewhere, and how many hours later, and all of that is just tragedy that can be avoided, and it's unnecessary. So that having been said, those are just some personal boundaries for me about triggers. However, triggers can happen for people. There are people who are triggered by dogs. They're triggered by a certain look of a person because of past experience with a person that look like that. A smell, a sound, a place, a memory. Something can be, we can be in the middle of I don't know, I was going to say the mall, and no, I won't be there. We can be anywhere in the grocery store and suddenly have a flashback if we have PTSD, or, even if we aren't diagnosed with that, we can recall something all of a sudden, and we're just in the moment of whatever the traumatic event was, or we have a flash memory of something, whether it was totally traumatic or not, something that was upsetting, and we can get kind of taken out of that moment of, where am I again? And when those aren't handled well, and then you pile on more people that with more authority that don't handle that well, and don't really have training on how to gracefully handle that, it does not usually end well. So I really try to avoid all of that by, not putting myself in that position as my own person with the history. And then if I see someone that looks like they're, on the edge or having a hard time, just offer them the comfort of, can I, help you in some way to at least bring safety in this moment? Because whatever triggers a person, if they aren't aware of them and they get to that spot, then it's, a whole different ball game. If we can stay in, the empowerment of, I know the stuff that really bothers me and I avoid that, and stretch my ability to the greatest extent that I possibly can without just being ridiculous by my standards. If I can stretch my ability and just get more desensitized to those things that would perhaps bother me, that maybe I might not be so afraid of being around a dog, I might get better about it, but I may never, before I actually die from this earth, be able to, sit with a dog right next to me. And that could be okay. And it would be okay if that person was balanced everywhere else in their life. If I'm able to do every other thing in my life, then take that as a win, and, perhaps not get too busy with, well, I should be able to, lick a dog before it's all over with. Maybe not. Let's just start with, can we recognize that that's a trigger? Can we see patterns? Can we see things that very often seems to be something that really bothers me? I don't like that. And when we listen to other people who might be willing to tell us, well, that's silly, I don't know why you'd be bothered by that. Well, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to really matter a whole lot. We're not at a time in history or in human evolution and development and our own growth as people, apparently, that we're going to be able to cope well with the upscale and violence and, just uncertainty. So it's very important that we can not only identify what bothers us, but also be able to say, you're going to need to step off me about what bothers me and why. And if I don't really want to, talk about it or whatever, then I have the right to not talk about it, as long as I'm dealing with my life in a balanced way. I don't really have to explain why I don't want to go to a mall or why I don't want to be, at a laser light show. I love Pink Floyd, but I don't want to go to a laser light show. That should be enough. That can be enough, and it would be enough in healthy connections. So finding those triggers, that's really the first point I wanted to make in this video, is to be able to understand, what those triggers are, and then be able to stand in the strength and the grounded, empowered place to say, that's what's really, that sound. I personally, I don't like whistling. Whistling is just, it sets in my ears weird. I'm think it's probably related to the neurology, the autism, but it just sets in my ear weird. And I've tried to desensitize, and it's just, why would I? It actually, feels like somebody's poking a knife into my ear, and it hasn't gotten better since I was a child. I used to think it was associated to my stepfather when I was growing up. He was a very ugly and mean man, and he whistled a lot, and I thought, oh, it must be that, and it must be me, because it was kind of poo-pooed throughout my adulthood that someone in my life whistled, and I'd say, please, really, please don't do that. This isn't about me not being healed. This is about me saying that's really bothersome, and if I feel like I have a knife being sliced into my brain, could you maybe find another place to do that, or I'm going to need to find another place. But when we're on a highway, that might be a little bit difficult to be riding with someone, and so it was complicated because I had a lot of other mental health challenges, and anxieties and things like that. It was hard to say that really is a neurological thing. It makes my teeth hurt. It makes my head feel like it's going to explode. Could you not? That person didn't understand it, and he just kind of, looked at me. He would stop, but I got the shame session, and the you're so such a hothouse flower, and that one sat with me for a long time. But I wonder, is it me that I'm, am I really not healed enough to be able to tolerate a noise? What's wrong with that? Tolerating a dog because we've been attacked by one, and we're not able to do that. I can understand that, but this is a noise, and a noise. It's a noise, and it's not related. Once I got past the idea that my stepdad was not abusing me while he was whistling. He wasn't whistling while he worked at kicking my hiney. He was just, it was piercing in my ear as a child, and I started correlating and understanding more and more that, it's those sharp, sounds, they make my teeth hurt. They really sound like, something's just being severed inside, and this kind of ice pick going in there. No. And so I realized that we need to separate out in those trigger sessions, what's just annoying. And, I might be able to get over the dog attack someday because I can desensitize myself to that. But if I'm not ever able to desensitize myself to the sound of somebody whistling or a dog, then I need to respect it either way. But I did have that thought that, this is a perpetual noise. It's a whole group of things, not just, that I'm trying to be a hothouse flower. And even if I really needed you to not do that, it'd be just kinder. Even if you thought I was a hothouse flower, it would just be kinder to say, okay, I'm not asking you to stop breathing. I'm not asking you to stop eating. I'm not asking you, to run a marathon or something. I'm not asking you to do anything, real mind bending here. Just can you wait for your drum solo through the mouth to happen, at a different time. And it was very difficult for me to understand. And that alone was a trigger that I then can't ask for my needs because, they're going to be viewed as silly, stupid, whatever. And we don't have time anymore. We're not in a time in our lives on this planet where we can afford to not really ask for our needs to be met, or ask for the boundary at least to please don't do that near me, or I need to move. And if you're not going to guarantee me that, you will stop when I ask, then I'm going to need to reevaluate the boundaries of our relationship, because you might really have some problems elsewhere that are also going to be problematic. I mean, it can go quite deep, but anyhow, I'm going to stop with that one right now, and just say that when we're very introspective and we know about our triggers, that's a really good place to start. We can start really seeing patterns in the types of things that bother us, not just specific triggers, but talk about those things that are in groups. Like I said, noises. It wasn't just whistling. When I started really paying attention of why does that bother me? Is this just something that I can desensitize to, or does this just rack my neurological system because I may never be able to get over that? And so far at 54, almost 55 years old, I have not, and it has nothing to do with whose mouth it is. I don't like that sound out of anyone's mouth. It's just, no, you won't find me at a whistling concert. It's not going to happen, especially if they've got laser lights going at the same time. So anyhow, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that you're well, and please do get inside your skin and get within, because inside your skin, you're divine. It's absolutely fine. It can help you figure out every bit of it when we go inside and really reach our higher selves, our higher consciousness, our higher understanding of us, outside of what anybody else might be busybodying our direction and telling us we are. We really can figure it out. We just have to go inside and start noticing those patterns of maybe this is something that's really just going to be you know, quite next to impossible for me to get over, or maybe this is a place where I can stretch, and nobody out here that can really tell you that for sure and for realsy, but we can tell ourselves, and we can allow that guidance to happen when we're willing to be introspective. So take care, be well, and I'll see you again next time, friends. Thank you. Bye-bye.